the top comment's something like, didn't expect Thorin to just reveal his cocaine use.
Loves cocaine.
I know, like, the top comment with like 50 thoughts.
Of course.
Foreplay is back for our next arc. It's another director's arc. We couldn't get enough of the last director's arc with Denis Villeneuve, so we're back with Paul Thomas Anderson this time around, guys. These movies are going to be a little bit more niche, and I will say, probably a lot of you got very angry at our Dune review, which, by the way, was super funny because if you listen to what we were saying while we were raging against a lot of the takes that existed, I like how Richard at the end of that one just slipped in but it was a 7 out of 10, though.
It was. I mean, look, all I'm saying is that because obviously the channel, you and Doa did the 1984 Dune review as well. Like, and I mean this completely earnestly, I will 100% watch David Lynch's Dune again. I have little to no interest in watching Denis Villeneuve's Dune. And, that's not because it's not a well-constructed, blockbuster movie, but it's just really drab with the source material. I mean, at least David Lynch's Dune has, Patrick Stewart with a pug.
And a skull
under his arm, charging into battle, milking hairless cats. There's just none of that charm in the other movie. So I understand that to this generation, this probably, especially after the disappointment of Star Wars, this is their generational sci-fi movie, but for us, not at all. So I'm sorry if they got upset by it, but the movies we're about to discuss are infinitely better.
I think when we talk about Dune, there were two things that really kind of swayed me, and I still think it's a pretty good movie, by the way. I know we came down super hard on it because everybody's talking about how great it is, and so I think we reacted very strongly to discussing a lot of the flaws. Especially because we're fans of the source material.
Source material.
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
But there were a few things that really tilted my vision of it. One of which was that I watched it again, and the second watching is like a lot worse than the first watching. And secondly, we had just watched all these other great Villeneuve movies, and they really just paled in comparison to the other three that we watched for this show.
Yeah, for sure. I think. That's also another thing as well. You can see how, his career arc has took him to this place where studios believe he's a safe hand for what is essentially blockbuster slop. And that's fine, but it is kind of sad because he used to make these small, pared down, really interesting films. And Dune is, for me, anything but interesting. It's like, it's visually impressive, but it's got an ensemble cast. It's got very predictable story beats, even within a world that should be anything but. And also, I mean, the choice of what to leave in and what to take out. He got a lot of praise, I think, for it being streamlined and easy to understand. I kind of want Dune to be a little bit convoluted and weird because we're projecting all this distance into the future. I don't think it should necessarily be simple and clean. So yeah, it's sad. I'm sure. Look, listen, he's gonna do another Doom movie, and probably he'll do something small and interesting again. I don't think he's out totally as a director, but yeah, these Doom movies just aren't it for me, unfortunately.
Well, as we switch to Paul Thomas Anderson, we are going to be doing Hard 8 today, and then we are going to follow up with his films in the following order: Magnolia, The Master, and we'll finish with Phantom Thread. Now, you will notice that there is no There Will Be Blood, as we mentioned in our last episode. Yep. You see, here's the thing, guys. we like to be super elitist, and There Will Be Blood is just too mainstream at this point in time. We did Dune for you, so we have to actually draw you back into some perhaps less seen films at this point in time. Otherwise, our elitism can't handle it. We were actually getting too popular with this show. The Villeneuve arc was doing too well in terms of viewership, so it's time to dial it back down for a little bit.
By the way, I could see a world, though, where we do watch that film, but just in a different one. Like, maybe in the future we do one where it's like super hyped films and we say whether they were legit.
It is a great movie.
There are other categories we could put There Will Be Blood in. Like, we could do a Daniel Day-Lewis fucking season and maybe it goes in there, you know. So there'll be ways some of them will come back in the future anyway. I agree with you. It's so obvious.
Paul Dano playing a creepy weirdo. Do pretty much every movie. We can pick anyone else.
So we all like There Will Be Blood, but we didn't want to go a big time blockbuster movie that everybody has seen. There's plenty of commentary about about that already. I don't think there's anybody who's commenting on this movie, Hard 8 or The Master, right? Those are definitely more niche. The Master is, I think, kind of tragically underappreciated as a in all but name exploration of
almost
Scientology.
Like Scientologists might have tried to suppress it for some reason. But.
Yeah, weird. And obviously, The Master.
Jokes aside, that probably does affect things. Like, I'm sure if you're just someone who works in the mainstream film, you don't really want to go, and my top 5 films include, and then name that, do you? Like, you probably just go out your way not to mention it in some ways, you know.
That's how you get the Scientology surveillance on you for 10 years and the constant harassment and frivolous lawsuits, which, this film tried to avoid by basically not calling Philip Seymour Hoffman's character L. Ron Hubbard and not calling it Scientology, but everybody knows that it's L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology, which is very great.
I love the idea as well that he had, because he knew Tom Cruise personally because of Magnolia.
True.
That's true.
He brought Tom Cruise in for an early showing of that movie.
Oh boy,
fucking hated it. But we'll talk about that on that episode.
I mean, he probably just couldn't handle how Joaquin Phoenix portrayed him in the film. So it's the way I wish I could do that joke with a straight face. Like I actually thought it was real, but whatever. I gave myself.
Actually, it can't be because when he did the Rorschach test, he identified a vagina correctly. So. That's a really deep joke. I don't know if anyone's going to appreciate that one, so we'll just move on. I'm saying he's a closet homosexual. That's what.
All right. So let's talk about Hard 8. So this is Paul Thomas Anderson. We really are starting at the beginning here. You know, we didn't start at the beginning with a lot of the indie films that Villeneuve did. We are starting with the very beginning here, which is going to be his first feature-length film. It is a character kind of thriller drama piece called Hard 8. This was based off of a short film that I'm not sure if you guys have seen it. I have not seen it, called Cigarettes and Coffee, not to be confused with Coffee and Cigarettes by Jim Jarmusch, which threw me for a moment because I thought I was going crazy when I read that title.
No. Basically, a lot of great directors have kind of done this, actually. It's kind of like Michael Mann with LA Takedown. You know, he what he did here was he made a short film, and funnily enough, it had one of the same actors. I think it was the Philip Baker Hall.
Yes, he was in the short film as well. Yeah,
and a wonderful character actor that we'll talk about. But basically, he got a budget on the basis of that to essentially update it. And what's crazy is, I mean, like, you know, you think about like PTA films and how, you know, big in scope they get and big budgets and how like insane they kind of are in terms of just polish, because another director who knows how to make his dollar go far. This was a update of a tiny film that actually, within context, is still a ridiculously tiny film that has a handful of actors in it, but they're all names that went on to be big or relatively big, like really astutely cast. And I think if I was to say to you, Pete, like, Paul Thomas Anderson, you would think of his films, you would go, oh, yeah, he's like that early 2000s guy. This is like the middle of the 90s. It's
96,
like 96.
this film. Yeah.
Yeah, which is like fucking crazy to even think that this guy made this movie at that period of time, and it bombed. It it barely made any ripples critically. It just kind of was there. It was just a director doing his thing. It just existed, and yeah, not a lot of people saw this. I mean, again, I'm consider myself pretty informed about movies. Consider myself a cinephile. You know, like would certainly watch a low budget movie. Used to regularly watch for things that won awards at Cannes and the Sundance. And I never saw this until after I'd already seen a Paul Thomas Anderson film. It was kind of like just this underspoken thing. And I'm also a fan of noir, and I guess that's what this essentially is. So, very interesting. I think this will probably be the most obscure film we'll actually cover.
The thing is, the reason I actually suggested this as one of the films we do for this arc is because this is just one of those ones where, if people don't know, the way I've always watched movies ever since the era of the internet is I just do basically, I pick a film I like, I go to the Internet Movie Database page, I look who's the director, who's the scriptwriter, maybe the actor if they're a really amazing actor, but there's only a few actors I tend to do that with, and then I just look what are their other work, and I try and like see what other stuff. And I remember doing exactly what Richard's talking about. I think I'd already seen Magnolia, maybe. Yeah. I think I'd maybe already seen Boogie Nights as well. I remember looking up and going, what is this? And I just looked it up, got it, watched it. And the reason why I wanted to suggest it for this arc is, one, I've never met anyone ever who's mentioned this film or seen it, even though actually Paul Thomas Anderson, in his own way, has quite a niche following. Like, people do know There Will Be Blood in a lot of his films. In fact, the joke is, I'm pretty sure when they see the 4 movies, actually, if not There Will Be Blood, everyone will be complaining we didn't do Boogie Nights. Well, the reason why I also thought this film was a good one putting is, not only has everyone seen Boogie Nights, Magnolia, and potentially There Will Be Blood, but this film, like you're alluding to, even though it doesn't have the scope, it's not like Magnolia, it's got like 10 storylines all interacting, because it's not that scale of film. It basically is almost like a theatre play where you get like 6 actors and you just do a really good job, and you just have set scenes and you don't go too far, you keep it self-contained. But the key thing about why it's good is, one, it is a good film. 2, if you like Paul Thomas Anderson films, you're actually going to be shocked you haven't seen this. It's actually pretty good. It's very much within his vein of how he does his films. And then lastly, as you alluded to, it's one of those films, maybe a bit like an LA Noir, which looks, LA Confidential rather, which locks into an insane cast that wasn't the cast at the time. Like, these people, like, if you don't know, guys, John C. Reilly basically is famous because of Paul Thomas Anderson films. Well, in this case, he's just a nobody. Even the main actor, there's the Philip Baker Hall guy. The joke is, I have seen him in 1 million things. He's even a very famous episode of Seinfeld. No one knows this guy's name. I didn't know this guy's name. In fact, I'll tell you the obvious to talk about this film. The alternate name of the movie is Sydney, which is just the name of the main character, which is the Philip Baker Hall guy. And by the way, that is a perfect name because the movie is that guy's performance. Like, the main thing you're watching for is that central performance. I agree with Richard. I actually think, what a mad, underrated actor. Like, it's usually because he tends to get put very much in side character, and he's very, by the way, he's very typecast as sort of like a cop type person or an older authority figure. He fucking, the idea this is one of the few films he's like a central lead in is crazy, because he is masterful in this fucking film. Like, I'll just say it this way. If you watch the first 10 minutes of this film and you're not digging it, just turn it off. It's not for you. It's just what it is from the beginning. It's just that the whole way through. It's basically just about this guy just fucking killing it. Maybe he's killing it on camera every second he's there. Like, his poise, his composure, the way he even could do stuff like switch up like his mood and his tone and his act. Oh, this guy, what's funny is some of the other people become way bigger, more famous actors and actresses, and some of them have had much bigger movie careers, but I think this guy just slays them all on screen. And by the way, he's on screen with people like fucking Samuel L. Jackson and like John C. Reilly. These are legit actors. So, and by the way, even Gwyneth Paltrow is pretty good. So I think Philip Seymour Hoffman's in it. Also, by the way, like another thing, Paul Thomas Anderson uses a rotating cast, so you see a lot of the cast he uses for those later films in this one. So I think that's a good in, because to me, you have to start with that fucking Philip Baker Hall guy. Like, I think he kills it in this film. I think he's really good.
You know the first thing they should have taught you at hooker school? You get the money up front.
Fuck you.
Yeah. And we'll definitely be talking about him in Magnolia as well. 'Cause he's really
I mean, basically, obviously this is another director that uses ensemble cast like Villeneuve does to a certain degree, right? And what we saw Josh Brolin, right? They like to, continue to work with the same actors. And, it's not just John C. Reilly. Philip Seymour Hoffman wouldn't be famous without Paul Thomas Anderson either. And, a lot of these people, you're going to see multiple instances throughout these 4
he's
films.
only in it for like 5 minutes as well.
Oh, yeah.
Philip Seymour Hoffman, in theory, actually might be the best actor in the film, but he's only in it for 5 minutes and plays just a complete, it would be a forgettable role.
He plays a cunt.
Yeah, he does.
With a mullet, no less.
That's great. But it is funny, like you look at the actual list of these actors. And remember, again, this was a $3 million budget and a film that made $200,000 in theaters. It didn't even make 10% of the amount of money it cost to make this film. And it has John C. Reilly, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Samuel L. Jackson in it, right? Gwyneth Paltrow and Philip Baker Hall. The cast is mega. How this film could only make $200K shows you that these actors were just not well known or appreciated at that time.
At the time, yeah.
And look, I mean, his history, Philip Baker Hall, it's again super interesting. He worked with a ton of great directors, and like I say, he was like considered a character actor, but he was another guy who had come from stage. He'd done stage play stuff. And he actually worked with, there is a movie called Secret Honor that was directed by Robert Altman. It's a kind of a one-man study of Richard Nixon. And Philip Baker Hall played Richard Nixon, if you can sort of imagine that. And what was super interesting about that was he did the Robert Altman movie, but he also did, when that went to Broadway, he did that too. And this is why, in this movie, and it works for and against the movie. We'll definitely talk about it once we get past the summary of the plot. But he is very, you can hear that stage delivery, I think, at key moments with his monologues. And as I said, sometimes that's really, really good. And sometimes it took me a little bit out of this because it's meant to be, Reno, Vegas. I've lived there. I know what it's like to be in a casino at fucking 4 a.m. watching some loser pump his life savings into a slot machine while he's on a mobile phone to his wife saying he's definitely not doing that.
And it's even sadder in Reno because Reno's just a significantly sadder city.
Oh, yeah. Reno is a massive downgrade. Yeah,
I spent a lot of time in Reno because I spent a lot of time in Tahoe, and Reno is the closest major city to Tahoe. So I've been down there a lot.
Yeah, and it is pathetic.
It's better than it used to be.
They really captured it quite well in this film. But I will say, Philip Baker Hall is one of those immensely underappreciated performers. He's done so much. If you look at his filmography, it's wow, he was in that, and then you kind of you remember he was, and sometimes it's small bits, I'm trying to think of a notable little small performance he had. He was in The Insider, and
the film he did before this, which Paul Thomas Anderson named his character after, was Midnight Run, which is kind of a low-key underrated movie, honestly, the one with Robert De Niro. It's pretty funny. Yeah, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, he's in that. He's also, I think he plays the police captain in the Rush Hour series. He's just like a bonkers character actor who just turns up and stuff, but really, really good and certainly underappreciated. And if it wasn't for Paul Thomas Anderson, I don't think he would ever have had these really meaty roles that he can get into, because like I said, we'll talk about it in the Magnolia episode, but these are significant emotional back and forth, huge issues to deal with. Magnolia especially, but this one too. This is, as the story's unveiled, it's Shakespearean essentially. So it's really cool. It's really cool that he got to do this.
As Thorin said, this is like Dog Day Afternoon, which is another film that could be staged as a play quite easily, because it's basically, all the scenes are in just a couple of rooms. It would be very easy to change out sets there, and so you really, like we saw with Al Pacino and the other actors in Dog Day Afternoon, you really need some very good acting chops, because you have to know your lines and be in that scene entirely for multiple minutes.
Watching the acting. That's why I say if you don't like the first 10 minutes, don't watch it, because this movie is just enjoying these people having conversations, but it's not like a plot that's really progressing. There is a plot loosely, but it's just an excuse to get you in another room and having a conversation, you know.
Yeah, and put you in an uncomfortable situation that the characters are trying to get out of. But there's no action, guys, really.
And if anything, the one real action scene, which is later on in the film, is also worth it. The payoff is fucking... Like when this fucking guy who is just an OG just handles fucking Samuel. That is fire. Like the way, we'll get to that later, but that part alone, the payoff is mega. So one thing I would just say is, I think, to touch on what Richard said, the other thing about this film is, the joke is the two characters in this film are Sydney, the Philip Baker Hall guy, and then fucking Reno. That is essentially the other character, because the ambience they make is mega. Because what they do is, obviously this is like the seedier, shittier version of Vegas, and every person in this place, including the main character who has all this poise and experience, they've all been tainted and compromised and corrupt in some way. And what's great about this film, this is why I said to me, this is like the essence of Paul Thomas Anderson films, is you think of films like Boogie Nights and Magnolia, what everyone loved about those storylines. It's all here. It's all here. The idea that, like, yeah, everything is a bit fucked up and everyone themselves is fucked up and horrible things happen. But you notice beneath it all, there's always like a bit of a heart, though. There's always certain characters that have like that human quality where they will just like do something nice for someone, or they'll help someone, or there's a happenstance of when you meet someone in a certain way. And so what I find very enjoyable actually is he doesn't just like wallow in the darkness. He's not trying to make some like fucking French film where you want to kill yourself after you watch it. Like there's always like there's always a heart underneath it.
I want you to see that my reasons for doing this are not selfish, only this. I'd hope that you would do the same for me.
I would. Thank you.
So I actually thought that was really a cool dynamic too, because by setting it in this really seedy place, like spoiler, when you meet the Samuel L. Jackson character immediately, if you can't tell he's a piece of shit, like you just don't get the point of this film. Like that is so obvious when you meet that guy. Because the other thing, obviously, like Richard says, that they alluded to, one thing I think is masterful about this film is they don't hit you over the head with exposition. They don't ever sit down and go, what I'm doing is sort of treating them like they're my kids because I have kids and I had a problem with it. And also I killed their, like, no one ever does that. Like it's revealed in little piecemeal parts, but some of it's never said. Like actually, by the way, it is just inferred that he's sort of having a sort of like surrogate father approach with these people. And so I thought that part was quite interesting as well, because they really let it breathe. They don't try to like hammer you over the head with it or tell you explicitly. And in fact, I actually think as well, that is a selling point of this film, is that it keeps the mystique of that main character in a way, which I thought was very interesting. Why actually, like I say, that payoff of the action scene is really cool, because you're not quite sure, is he still that sort of a person? Does he have a darkness to him? Has he, in fact, you're even wondering things like, early on, is it just that he doesn't have kids of his own? You know, you don't know where this is going. So I actually thought, for me, I can see why there might be a sort of Zoomer who might watch this and go, I thought it was boring, nothing happened. It just wasn't your type of film. And I really settled in immediately. I just enjoyed this. I was enjoying the journey it took me on.
I hadn't seen this one, so I was just drawn in immediately. I thought this was fantastic, and I thought the characters were really interesting. And I will go over a brief summary of this film right now. It's a lot of conversations, guys. Remember, this came from a short film that was called Cigarettes and Coffee. So a lot of this film is just drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes and talking. That's what a lot of it is, or standing around in casinos and talking. Or, you know,
which is what we all used to do before watching Skibbity Toilet on TikTok. So.
Richard's yearning for the cigarette days, the diner cigarette days. Although they do, it's shot in a way that makes it look super cool in this movie, right? Because it really, there is something very attractive. Because many of you guys probably
lung cancer has never been so appealing.
But many of you guys never lived through this era. But like, smoking in diners used to be a thing, and used to go in there and it was smoky, and it was kind of shitty for everyone who wasn't smoking, but it was pretty nice for people who were smoking, being able to like be in that environment and talk and have these slow conversations while you're kind of doing something and obviously ingesting a drug at the same time. But in any case, this movie starts with, so as we mentioned earlier, Philip Baker's Hall character is named Sidney. He is effectively a professional gambler slash man of ill repute that we don't know what he did from Atlantic City earlier on, which we'll get to. He actually just kind of walks up to a diner and finds a homeless guy just kind of sitting outside of this diner, who is John C. Reilly, says, hey, man, do you want a coffee and a cigarette? They go inside to this diner. They have this coffee and cigarette, and basically John C. Reilly says, I need $6,000 because I need to pay for my mother's funeral. Can I have it? And Philip Baker Hall, Sidney, is like, no, but I'm going to show you basically how to game the casino system. So he takes him along, puts him under his wing, shows him. And it is fun if you're into like kind of the intricacies of how casinos work, where basically he shows him how to kind of like cycle his money to make it appear like he's spending more than he is, so that the casino will give him a free hotel room.
By the way, considering it's like a theory, a complex concept, they show it very well on screen.
Yeah,
it's quite easy to pick up what they're saying. Yeah,
right. And so anyway, he basically, takes this guy who is kind of a moron, and John C. Reilly is very good at playing a stupid man. I gotta say, and you wonder, why is this very smart man, Sidney, trying to help this guy who is clearly quite dumb and will probably fuck this up? And eventually we get to years later. John C. Reilly has fallen into this relationship. So John is his actual name too. So it's actually very easy because John C. Reilly is playing a character named John. He falls in with this, basically waitress that's moonlighting as a prostitute who Sidney is also trying to help, and Samuel L. Jackson's character Jimmy.
Or is she a prostitute moonlighting as a waitress? You decide.
It's Reno, man. Who the fuck knows?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that's even, by the way, a central point of the film people might miss, which is their conversations imply that's actually just expected of you in Vegas. But at the same time, there's a weird hypocrisy where you're not allowed to explicitly get caught doing it, though. But it's literally it's the unwritten rule that you're just supposed to do that if the right customer says to do.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
it even again hints at the seediness of the place. Yeah.
Totally.
So Jimmy is a guy who runs security and thinks of himself as a much fiercer dog than he actually is. Tries to be a tough guy. He comes from the East Coast. So eventually what happens is, after the break of several years, we see John and Clementine. Clementine is Gwyneth Paltrow's character. They are, of course, getting married randomly while she's still hooking, so the whole situation's really messed up. They end up in a hotel room beating up a John who refused to pay her. A John meaning a man who, not John the character, but John the man who, the name of a man who hires a prostitute, the unnamed John.
This script is so good, it's probably deliberate that John C. Reilly's character is called
John. Of course.
She marries a John. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think, of course, that must be
because I also think, by the way, that is something about actually this film you have to say as well. Like I say, I actually think they did put things like that in intentionally. They just don't overtly say it. They want you to figure it out. Yeah.
You put the pieces together.
So probably, the climax of this movie is John and Clementine beating up this guy, and Sidney coming in and being like, what the fuck did you guys just do in here? And this is a very bad situation. So he tries to get them out of it, successfully kind of gets them out of it. Jimmy shows up, who's John's friend, who Sidney doesn't like and is very explicit about not liking because he is a scumbag. And who is dangerous to John and like dangerous basically to anybody he's around because he thinks he's a tough guy and like wants to get into trouble effectively. So he then starts threatening Sidney by saying, hey, I know you killed John's father in Atlantic City. I come from the East Coast. I was in with a bad crowd there. And so basically he decides to blackmail Sidney, takes his money. Sidney then breaks into his house, waits for him to come home, and guns Jimmy down when he comes home so that his secret could be safe. John and Clementine are driving all the way across America to New York for Niagara Falls for their honeymoon. And so basically Sidney is obsessed with maintaining the father-son relationship that he has with John, and arguably father-daughter relationship he has with Clementine in their weird found family fucked up way, because now we know John's father was killed. That's why he didn't have anybody to bury his mother. And really, Sidney was responsible for all of that, and in a way has kind of taken responsibility for that situation, weirdly. So there you go. It's actually a relatively simple plot.
He says in the dialogue that he doesn't speak to his own children, so there's an obvious angle where he's also mirroring that. I actually thought I'd cue you up here, Richard, because you have famously said in esports that since you haven't had a family of your own and had children, unlike Monty, who's a breeder here, right? You've always said that to you, your proteges and people you've sort of brought up are your sort of esports. So I thought for you, it would be a perfect sort of like a reference point, right? You've sort of done something similar to this main character, right?
Especially the assumptive, like there must be something in it for you. You can't, so it's not a direct thing because obviously, as we know, Sydney's racked with guilt because he did do something horrible, like John C. Reilly's character. But I mean, like with the Paltrow angle, it's like there's this real sad aspect to it when Clementine is like, she's super nice to him in the restaurant, and he, you know, she works in the bar, and he's just doing his little $2 gambling on the fucking Keno. You know, he's watching the numbers come in, and she's flirting with him and calling him captain and all this stuff. And he goes, "Just no, you don't have to do that with me. Like, I'm not about that." And then when she falls on hard times, he says, "You can stay here." And she goes, "So you want to fuck me?" And he goes, "No." You know what I mean? Because it's like everybody, like, whenever you just do something kind for somebody else, people always assume there's an angle. People always assume the worst. And so I can definitely identify with that part of it.
Captain?
Yeah.
Do you want to fuck me?
Do you think that?
Oh, you brought me here.
Do you think that?
I don't know.
And yeah, I mean, like, equally as well, I'll say a lot of times your proteges, some of my esports proteges, they do let you down, don't they? And unfortunately, John C. Reilly's character in this has been given this incredible opportunity to learn from somebody that, you know, understands how these things work. He was definitely lost without Sydney.
And it honestly is a real gentleman and like quite refined as well, because what we find out later is John is copying all of Sydney's taste, basically.
Like, he even buys like the same car, if you notice. It's like a very subtle point. What I love as well is the way they tell that is genius, because they show the scene where he's showing him, like you say, Monty, the montage of it. Here's how you take the chips and then you cash them in over here and then you come back on the car. And then what they do is they just cut to like 2 years later and they don't explain anything. You can just see it. You see he's dressed the same way. He's acting the same. He's still doing the same thing this guy taught. And then later, like I say, that's actually a detail people won't notice. He has like the same fucking car. I'm telling you, there's even a scene where they're like driving off. He's just copied this guy completely, like he really is just copying his dad. It's really well done.
Yeah. And so, yeah, you know, it's like sometimes, you know, I think it kind of it'll probably resonate more now than it did back then. I think probably tonally in the 90s, you are supposed to kind of think that Sydney might be a bit weird. Right? Because that's John C. Reilly's initial reaction. I'm not going to suck your dick, sir. You know, like, I'm not, you know, I'm not gay. I'm not, you know.
You'll say that about 10 times.
Yeah. Like right at the start, because he assumes he's like picking him up for sex.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you something right now. I don't suck dick, okay?
I understand that. And this is the last time I'll ask. You want my help?
But I think you're supposed to assume it's weird. But I think in the modern era, you know, we touched upon this with Tokyo Godfathers as well. People don't necessarily, you pick your family these days. I think people do that more and more. Like, for example, your average Christmas dinner or, you know, whatever it might be you celebrate where you come together with your family. A lot of the time it'll include people who aren't directly blood relatives. There'll be someone that you just have a great affinity for and someone you spend a lot of time with, someone you might even have lived with for a while. And people are really doing that more and more these days. And so I think probably you're supposed to initially be on John C. Reilly's kind of perspective. Oh, the Sydney guy's fucking weird. But I just don't think it reads like that now. I think people go, oh, what a nice old man, you know?
Well, I think also it does come across like you're suspicious of altruism for the sake of altruism, right?
Yeah.
Which, you know, part of that is that this isn't that in a way, right? This is atonement is what we find out that it is. It turns out that it's him atoning for his crimes, but we don't know that at the start, and we don't know that for 90% of the movie. So it just appears that Sydney, for whatever reason, likes this guy, which is confusing because this man is a shell of a man. He just inhabits
just a moron, yeah.
Sydney's personality. He doesn't have taste. Sydney is a man, is a gentleman of taste, very clearly. Even though he is in these seedy situations, he clearly has an air of intelligence and class about him, and he's very composed. He is what we think of as the Rat Pack era. When he was in his prime, that was 50s and 60s Vegas, which we think of as very glamorous, right? Because that's where Frank
They're even
Sinatra
trying
was.
to imply that with the contrast with the Jimmy character, Monty. Like that guy's obviously just the new school piece of trash who's just going to do whatever in criminal. Whereas, he's like sort of like the classy, like almost like mobster-esque associated figure. You're right.
Yeah. It's like the original Ocean's 11.
Old Vegas.
It's the original Ocean's 11. This is the crew that hung out at the the Stardust, right, back in the day before it was destroyed.
Yep.
The old Vegas before they made the current iteration of the Strip. For those of you guys who don't know, it was very classy. And also, it's very telling that this happened in Reno, because if you're not American or you're not from the West, you may not understand what Reno is. Reno is known as the divorce capital of America, because it's the closest city to the California Bay Area. It's about, 3.5, 4 hours drive from San Francisco. And so basically people just in California pop over the Nevada border because it's just easier to get divorced there. So there's been more divorces in Reno than anywhere else. And they wear this tag with pride. And the other reason you're in Reno is because it's the cheaper place to live, to get access to Lake Tahoe and the Sierra Nevada mountains, because Lake Tahoe is very expensive, right? And it's a bigger city. It's on kind of this low-lying desert at the foot of the mountains. It's actually geographically quite a beautiful city. Like, it's right at the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains. You can be up in Lake Tahoe in 45 minutes, an hour, which is world-class skiing, one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world. It's extraordinarily beautiful. And so you live there for that, or you live there because, this was the divorce capital of America. But for Reno has changed. I've been going to Reno my entire life, and Reno has changed. But it's still kind of seedy, and especially in the 90s, it was mega seedy. And it's like tier 8 casinos, guys. It was grungy. It was a dump. Like, it had none of the glamour of the Las Vegas Strip.
Well, just to underscore that point as well, a little detail about Sydney's character that I think is interesting. It's introduced by Jimmy when they have that conversation, and this is the whole thing about the hard 8, which is why it's called that. We know Sydney used to frequent Atlantic City.
Yep.
We know he was a high roller.
And Atlantic City, a famous dump.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Atlantic City, also a famous dump.
Fucking Reno, for fuck's sake. Like, it's heaven, isn't it? So, we know that he was out there in, Atlantic City in its heyday, and finds himself in Reno. And we know from his behavior and his activity, this is someone who he's quite well known in Reno. He's been there a while. Everybody knows him.
He's got this fancy hotel suite that he's in, that he resides in, basically.
No, I'd even go so far as to say, like, it's not that fancy by design. I think it's designed like it's what he's settled on. Like, he's okay with it, but everybody knows him. He's well liked. He's a regular guy. It's not that he has money, because remember, this is also about extortion. There's also an extortion storyline in this. And
he's only able to get like $8,000 or something.
Exactly.
Like all the money you can get together in the world. Yeah.
$8,000, which even in the 90s is like, that's kind of pathetic for a high roller. So what's all these little story beats in the movie are basically filling in a backstory for you if you pay attention to them. That's never explicitly explained. It's quite clever like that. But the way I think about Sydney's character is, obviously, he was a high roller who fell into some bad times, did some bad things, decided, fuck it, I don't want to be that guy anymore. I'm just going to go to Reno to essentially die. And this is why he's estranged from his family, doesn't talk to them. We'll talk about it in a moment, but I think he knows on some level the old version of him was a piece of shit. And he doesn't like it. He doesn't like that reality. So we go to Reno. It's small time. It's pathetic. It's no more than I deserve. It's the hell he chose, essentially. And
By the way,
that's really cool. No,
I also think, to me, as well as I told you, the original title was just City, because obviously it's basically like a character performance of this guy. But the reason why Hard Eight's also a great name is if people don't know the metaphor, that is one of the hardest things to actually roll in craps. And if you don't know, I looked up now, put it this way, that pays 9 to 1 if you roll a Hard Eight. So I actually took that as the metaphor for the film, because if you think about what he tells the John character early on, he basically tells him when he shows him that scam, like, don't abuse the scam, though. You just go to this point and it's safe. And if you do it this way, you'll get away. But don't think that you can just get because you got 2,000 because you got lucky when on the slot. Don't think you can get the 6,000. You can't. So to me, the metaphor also, which is very much in line with the character of the Philip Baker Hall guy, is like his style is you go in the safe, smart way to do things. But if you have to go for it like a Hard Eight, then you go all out. When there's a certain moment, a decisive moment, like when he kills the fucking Jimmy character at the end, that's a Hard Eight moment right there. Like, he's gambling, by the way, that he might ruin his whole life forever. But in that moment, by the way, you can't let that guy just fleece you. Because, by the way, I hope people do understand that actually is your only true option to kill that Jimmy character at the end. Because a guy like that will just keep coming back to that well over it. He'll be back for 5,000 next week. And eventually, he's going to use that piece of info against. So to me, I actually also hope people get that. To me, it was actually like almost an inevitable ending. But what a fucking way that ending is pulled off. Because think about it. You've got this character who the whole movie's telling you, do it the smart way, don't take risks. And at the end, he waits there like an actual fucking, like Neil McCauley from Heat or something, mate. He waits there all night with the gloves on, in the dark. It's not even fucking complete. He's just chilled, zen, fucking stoic. And then the way he just caps that motherfucker is it's glorious, mate. Because in that moment as well, what you also see, again, the contrast of new and old, is the new school guy thinks he's the hot shit, doesn't he? And his whole thing, the Samuel L. Jackson character, is insecurity about the idea. Like, you thought I worked outside. Like, I work on inside. I'm like a big deal, man. Hey, man, like, I'm making money. But then in the end, he actually gets taught a lesson via life, by the way, that, like, you actually underestimated your opponent, mate. You thought this was just some old guy from, like, see, this is a pro motherfucker. When he does something, he isn't just going to turn up on a wing and just go, oh, I'm just going to do whatever. No, when he takes care of you, mate, he's going to do it like a professional like that and just fucking do it and get away with it too. He's got the gloves on. He kills you in a place where no one will know where you are. There'd be no connection between you either. But yeah, that guy, I hope people know he just gets away with it. Like, and
kills him with his own gun.
Like, there's another banger. Yeah, what a fucking great payoff that is, by the way. Considering the rest of the movie is just talking and really slow.
I think it's really interesting that they called this.
One thing to add is, because this is another mad detail, is the woman who comes in with Jimmy is the fucking woman from Magnolia, but she's also a nobody at the time. Her name is like fucking Melora Waters, if people know. Her name still isn't even famous. But the main woman from Magnolia, you all remember, with the John C. Reilly character, she's in this. It's just the joke is, like Philip Seymour Hoffman, she's in it for, I don't even know if she has a line of dialogue. She's in it for like 5 seconds.
Screams.
She definitely screams.
Yeah, it just shows you how, like, this really is, like I'd say, this is the genesis of all PTA's oeuvre.
Yeah, I want to go back to the Hard Eight point, because I find it very interesting that they chose this name for the film. And I think, like, what you're saying, Thorin, makes a lot of sense. But he also, in a way, to tie this back into Heat, like Neil McCauley, goes against his own code. Because at the beginning of the movie, he literally tells John C. Reilly, when he's talking about, hey, did you bet? Did you gamble? How'd you do? I broke even. What were you playing? Blackjack, right? Oh, do you know how to count cards? No. I wouldn't play blackjack if I were you. He's literally saying that you should not play games of chance effectively. He's saying unless
if you count cards, it's the only way you can give yourself a slight edge. And otherwise, you like slight. I think you get like 49% if you play normal strategy. So what he's saying basically, Monty, is never take any like stupid angle. Always take something where you got a little edge, right?
And obviously, famously, craps is pure chance. Right. There is no skill in craps. You cannot bend the odds really to your favor. And a hard 8 is when you roll 2 4s in craps. But the thing is, I believe, maybe you can correct me on Richard, I'm not a big gambler. But basically, if you call a hard 8, the way you win is by rolling 2 4s. The way you lose is by rolling a 7 or rolling an easy 8, which is either a 2 and a 6 or a 3 and a 5.
He does in the film.
Yeah. That's what Philip Seymour Hoffman does. He rolls the easy 8.
Basically, like, craps is an insane fucking game anyway, because it's like you're not in control of. You can bet, and you're not in control of the rolls, right? Yeah. So that's an aspect.
Well, nobody's in control of the rolls, to be clear.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, like, you're not even necessarily physically rolling the dice. You can bet on other players, and as you say, obviously, when you bet a hard 8, the term hard 8 means it's a double 4. So even if you get a 5-3 or a 6-2, that's a soft 8, you lose. And obviously the other way you lose, as you said, is a 7, which is the most,
Common
likely
number.
outcome. Yeah. So, for me, what's super interesting about the hard 8, I mean, first of all, it's a really, obviously, they've deliberately picked it because it's the cool sounding crap.
It does sound
Gangster's
great.
fucked, doesn't it?
Yeah, the hard 8, right? But for me, I actually think the concept of the hard 8, it's actually woven into the film in like a really smart way, because it's not just like, oh, it's a hard roll to hit in craps. It's like, okay, so when Jimmy and Sydney, so Samuel L. Jackson and Philip Baker Hall, they sit down. This is like on their initial introduction. Jimmy smoking a cigarette and says to him, "Oh yeah, I saw you bet the hard 8, right? In Atlantic City." And what he's saying there is like, you placed this like gangster bet. You had big balls. You used to be a hell of a player. Everybody really respected you, but you didn't hit the hard 8. You fucked up, right?
I saw you playing crap over the original Doom. You bet the hard 8 for 1,000 and you pressed it for 2.
Did I hit it?
Nah, you didn't hit it. But it was a big balls bet, and I remembered your face.
Stupid bet.
And so that for me is like allegorical, like it pretty much encapsulates what his life is at that moment. Everything we know about the character is there's something, he's in Reno now, but he used to be in Atlantic City. We know he's kind of like living this pared down version of a high roller life in a place that's not really high rollers. So yeah, he's kind of like, he crapped out essentially. But then we see Sydney later on. This is when Philip Seymour Hoffman gets that great cameo.
Gangsters the fuck out of him too, doing the hard 8, doesn't he? Because you know what I love is the way the Philip Seymour Hoffman's face drops when he realizes he's actually been out gangstered by this guy.
Yeah, but I mean, not
that's
just
the put your dick on the table moment, in it.
$2,000 hard 8.
$2,000 hard 8's a bet.
The fuck.
But also because he keeps calling him big time, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're big time, and he bets the hard 8 again after Jimmy's conversation and loses, gets a soft 8.
Yeah.
And Philip Seymour Hoffman kind of has to say, "Wow, I'm sorry, I just cost you."
It's actually hilarious, isn't it, how he humbles him immediately.
I'll buy you a drink. I'm sorry, dude. And he walks off, right?
Shit! I'm sorry, big time. Hey, big time, I'll buy you a drink.
And then at the end, Jimmy, after having extorted money from Sydney, he goes and plays that money he's extorted, and he hits the hard 8, but then he gets killed. And so, for me, I always, I don't know if this is accurate or not, if this is like a general interpretation. I see the hard 8 as being like an allegory on how you handle the guilt of doing bad things to be a success. Because he's walked, we know he's killed John's father, right? We know he's done that, but he's put himself into a self-imposed exile. Like, betting the hard 8 was kind of like emblematic of what it was to be on top. He didn't hit it. He's not that guy anymore. Jimmy, on the other hand, is a fucking violent, hateful, just garbage person. He hits it because he can live with the guilt of all the terrible stuff he does. He can do it. And then, obviously when Sydney kills Jimmy at the end, the final scene is him meeting John in the diner, and he's got that blood stain on his sleeve that he just covers it up. And that's the stain of what it is to be the type of guy who can hit a hard 8, but he is not guilty. He is going to let the guilt, kind of, bleed into him. He is the type of person who can feel guilty. So I think it's like a super interesting film in that this little kind of obscure reference to a craps roll pops up throughout, and it's really about telling you who a character is, like who can hit the hard 8 and who can't. So yeah, it's a really fucking sharp script, and this is why I think of this movie a lot like a noir film. This is like the title of the movie is woven into the script and the story in a super smart and interesting way.
By the way, I also think as well, the irony is someone who watches the film now is going to think Samuel L. Jackson was typecast, but this is before he's even that type of an actor. Because the joke is, it is just a very Samuel L. Jackson. It's basically someone just taking relish to calling someone a motherfucker and talking about he might kill your kid. Like, it's a million roles you've seen him in. He does a good job with it, though.
It was actually quite a get, because bizarrely, even though you might think of Gwyneth Paltrow, probably not John C. Reilly so much, but actually Samuel L. Jackson had kind of just hit his big run of films, because obviously he did Pulp Fiction in like '94, and then what else? Oh yeah, he did Die Hard 3 before this.
I think so. I think it was 95, maybe.
Yeah, I think so as well. So I mean, like, he's technically the biggest actor in the movie, but not doesn't have the biggest part, isn't in the headlining role. I mean, like, like Samuel L. Jackson kind of is like, it's almost like he barely has any screen time. I think he's in it for like, it's probably less than 10
only a couple
minutes.
of scenes, isn't he?
Yeah, like it must be less than 10 minutes in the runtime. Maybe less than 8. So, I mean, he's just great, though. I mean, obviously, like, if you wanted somebody to play that kind of, like, malevolent, seedy underbelly of what, like, gambling and casinos and Vegas and Reno, he's perfect for that. And you get it immediately because of how he talks about, he's got that, like, pimponomic kind of brain when he's talking about the waitresses, and he's like, and
his greasy hair that's just disgusting.
Yeah. and obviously Sydney is going, can you not say that in front of them, because they don't need to hear that. They know the reality of what they do. And he's going, what, you think they're going to be upset that I'm saying they got great pussy? And it's like, yeah, he is fucking
Jesus, we are fucking surrounded by pussy here.
Hey, Jimmy.
What?
It's not for my ears, but hers. She can hear that sort of thing across the lounge. It puts her in a very uncomfortable position.
By the way, like I said, that sounds like, even that thing about pussy sounds like something Tarantino would have written for Samuel L. Jackson. Totally. That's how ridiculous it is.
Yeah. It's, and like you say, he is. I mean, everybody is great in this film. I mean, there isn't a bad performance. I mean, just to talk about Gwyneth Paltrow, because Gwyneth Paltrow wasn't actually a big actress at this moment in time. Her kind of, breakout would come after this, because it would be the year she did all them rom-coms. She did like Sliding Doors after this, and like '98, Shakespeare in Love, obviously, is the big one. That was '98 too. She did Great Expectations as well in '98. That was what essentially. So in this, and I think she's great in this, and I think she is perfect. Because if you've, all right, I'm trying to frame this in a way that's not going to get me cancelled. Although I don't even understand.
If someone also called Richard Lewis had frequented prostitutes at any point in time, maybe they, hypothetically, not in real life, a character not at all similar to Richard, maybe they would have an experience that you're about to describe.
No, well, not quite where I was going with it. Okay. Although thanks for volunteering that.
To be fair, if you go and read the comments, whatever that last episode we released was, what Sicario, the top comments something like, didn't expect Thorin to just reveal his cocaine use.
Loves cocaine.
I know, like, the top comment were like 50 reports as well.
I didn't feel that was very out of pocket. It's not like a weird thing to. I've enjoyed it from time to time myself, right?
Cocaine, no, I mean, and obviously, as someone that's been going to Amsterdam since the fucking '90s, yeah, of course, but like, that's not quite where I was going to go with it, although very, very close, adjacent. She is in this. She looks like that type of kind of. It's like, the type of beauty you will find in a place like that, that's been kind of just a little bit worn down with life. You know, the bags under her eyes and the thick makeup and the mascara that looks like
the
it's
slightly
been running.
wilted
She
rose.
Yes, exactly. She
I mean,
might have been
it's
crying
basically-
in a lunch break. You don't know.
It's like a beautiful woman who who maybe isn't a smoker, but has been in a smoky room for too many consecutive years.
but also as well, like someone that's not necessarily secure in that beauty, and she clearly isn't, you know, and like she is note perfect. You know, like I say, having lived in Vegas and having, you know, when I first moved out to Vegas and got sucked into the vortex of, wow, I'm in Vegas, I'm being paid a lot of money to be here, and this is pre-pandemic, I can enjoy this kind of fucked up opulence. The first 6 months I was in Vegas, right, I lived in a house, obviously, but I couldn't get off the strip. I was stuck in this endless cycle of.
Were you leaving Las Vegas or something? Fucking come on.
No, listen, bro. It was mental. I don't know if you know this, but like, so this is how it used to go, right? I would go to the strip, right, and I was like, wow, I'm on the strip, so I would like pick a hotel to stay in, you know, the Venetian, the Aria, you know, Bellagio, whatever the fuck it was, and then I would go there. I would get fucked up. I would drink. And I would drink to the point of a crippling hangover in the afternoon. But Vegas, you can just get a late checkout for free. You don't have to go until 3 in the afternoon. If you pay $60, they'll even let you stay till 5. So what would happen is I would always want to go back home, but I'd be too fucked up and too hungover. So I'd call down and be like, oh, hi. Unfortunately, something's come up today. So I was just wondering if I could arrange a late checkout. And they go, no problem, Mr. Lewis, of course. How's 3 o'clock for you? And you go, yeah, no problem. You go back to sleep, and then you wake up and you still feel fucked up. And you go, oh, I'm really sorry. You'd make up some bullshit story, and they know it's a bullshit story. You can tell in their tone of voice. Any chance of that 5 o'clock? And they'd be, well, it's going to cost you $60, Mr. Lewis. That's fine. Yeah, just $60, no problem. Boop. And then you would be like, okay, you'd wake up, it'd be like 4 o'clock. You'd go, fucking hell, I'll get some room service while I'm here. I'll order something to eat. And so you get a steak and a lobster tail with a big spicy Bloody Mary, and it's just up to the room, and you would eat that, and then you go, fucking hell, I feel loads better now. Start drinking again, and you call down and go, can I get the room again for the night? And I did this, and I was stuck on the strip for like 6 months. I couldn't get home. It was barely home. And I'm talking like, again, without trying to sound too crude, if you want to get escorts in Vegas, by the way, and I'm talking gorgeous, you know, like they come to the room and they go, this was like my last modeling thing, and they like they show, and it's very expensive, but when you're making money you can do that. There's people in the hotels in Vegas whose sole job is to discreetly make sure the escort gets to your room and discreetly usher them out, and there's, you know, so nobody knows what's going on. And
in every hotel also there are particular bars where they hang out. So it's like there's like a zone.
Classic thing, isn't it? Like, if someone's a businessman
looking for a date, sir.
If you're sat at the bar in a hotel or a casino and a woman approaches you, strikes up conversation, but spoiler, that's a prostitute with 99.9999%. Like, don't even imagine you're in a movie where like, your love of your life just met you. She did.
And you know, like, so the weird thing about this is you get sucked into it, and the more you stay and the more you spend, the more they give you for free because they don't want you to go. So I mean, literally, you know, I would be in the hotel for like 5 days. Remember, I live 15 minutes up the road, and I've been there for days. Like, I'm a tourist, but I live here. And they would just be like, "Oh, it's freaky." There'll be people in the casino come up to you, Mr. Lewis. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're gonna be gambling today, sir?" Yeah, I might hit the tables. Yeah. Oh, no problem. Here's a scotch. It's the Glenfiddich or whatever you like that, right? And they keep you there. They keep you there with free dinners and free drinks, and they pretend you're a high roller when you're anything but. And it took me 6 months to get bored of that. It was very hard to break the spell. And so I can completely identify with that. And obviously there were nights where not all of the women, not all of the people that you meet are people on the game trying to fucking, you know, get paid. There were, you know, the exact type of waitress that Gwyneth Paltrow is. They're finishing a shift at 5 a.m. They just want to fucking party with someone. Anyone, please. Like, you know, and you'll just be like, I'll see you at the end of your shift. I'm in the hotel you're working in. So I will meet you literally. And you take, I went on dates with waitresses. They were still dressed in the casino shit. It was like, fuck it, let's just go out. Who gives a fuck, you know? So it's a very interesting place. Put it that way, and I love that there's something opulent about it, but there's also something pathetic and seedy about it, and I'm more than aware of that. and this movie,
that's what's wonderful about Vegas, though. That's the thing, is it's the only place on earth like that. So
yeah, it really is. But anyway, as I said, I think Gwyneth Paltrow has this incredible authenticity in this movie. Like it a lot of the actors, like I look at John C. Reilly and I go, yeah, it's him. And it's great because you can see the genesis of what is one of the two characters.
It's very raw at this point,
Yeah. He's one of it's the genesis of one of the two characters he can play, which is he can play the kind of naive moron, and it's not overtly comic, or he can play the full-blown comedic retard, which is deliberately comic, and that's about it. That's like the great. That's the John C. Reilly. You know, I think like Step Bros, for example, or
what's the one he did? What's the one he did where it's like memeing on like fucking Walk the Line or whatever? You know, the one where it's like
the Dewey Cox story.
That is actually really funny. Like it looks really stupid, but it's really funny actually.
What's really good about it is that it wrecks musical biopics.
It does. It's really good.
That's actually where it succeeds.
All the singing scenes are really funny. I'm telling you. Like, I'm not even that big a comedy guy, but that is a bag of fun.
I just every time I think of that movie, I can't help but laugh at that new Elvis movie that Baz Luhrmann did, where Tom Hanks has that scene that's been on Twitter a million times, where he hears Elvis on the radio and he goes, "He's white," and it just like
there you go.
zoom in, and it's like, oh my god, Dewey Cox did this exact joke, like, and nobody knows. So but I mean, like that's who John C. Reilly does. He can play the really stupid buffoon, educationally subnormal, idiot played for laughs, or he can be like this, and it's like, he played this guy in Boogie Nights and played this guy in, a few other movies. And he doesn't have great range, but I think he does this role very well. And again, I really like him in this movie, but I do think Gwyneth Paltrow is probably the most authentic. It's very easy to forget she's a star now, when you watch her in this role. I think she's really, really good and just plays that like constantly weepy, drunk, hysterical, miserable, like, I've given my body away. When am I going to get paid?
I'm not going anywhere.
We don't have a choice.
John, I'm going to tell you something right now. This man owes me. He fucked me, and now he's going to pay me.
Don't be crazy, all right? Don't be crazy, honey.
Like they kidnap and torture a guy for like
she's also
$300. It's fuck all. It's so
she's also just a user, right? Because she uses John's character. She's going to marry him, knowing that he's infatuated with her while still hooking, right?
Yep.
And then when she gets in trouble
right after they're married, and like when he turns around, she's already fucking off with the guy.
And by proxy, obviously. And she knows this. She's using Sydney and Sydney's kindness as well. She knows.
I'm glad you picked up on that, Richard, because that was the other thing I was going to say. I hope people don't just read her character straight as like, she's just a lost person who needs help.
Nope.
She's also playing that up. Like, to me, that actually was, I also saw that nuance in the performance of like, she's doing the sort of do-eyes to like get them all to help and do everything for her. I mean, the joke is she's going to make the John C. Reilly guy do the murder and kill this guy.
Yep.
She's
actually
she clearly knows how to manipulate them.
Yeah, she's the mirror of Jimmy. Jimmy is manipulating John and wants to get to Sydney and wants to, she's the same. She is just doing it in a different way. And this is kind of like what again is kind of interesting. I think it's not overtly said, but Sydney gives John C. Reilly's character pass after pass after pass because he knows he's essentially an orphan, right? He is.
Yeah, but he's also a grown man. Like,
yeah. But also, like because of the role he played, and he kind of feels bad because without the male role model guidance in his life, maybe he wouldn't have turned up so washed up and fucking pathetic. And also, as well, I mean, like. He is like a fucking golden retriever in this movie, John C. Reilly. I mean, right from the start, he's like, "Sir, I'm not going to suck your dick, sir. I'm not doing it, sir." So
I know
three
karate.
types of karate. I know 3 types of karate. Where he goes, what is it, like kung fu, taekwondo, and regular karate?
Something like that, yeah.
What
such
a
a good
fucking
line.
Yeah,
What
jiu-jitsu
a
was one of them,
line!
yeah, true.
What a line that is.
I'll fuck you up if you fuck with me. I know 3 types of karate, okay? Jiu-jitsu, Aikido, and regular karate.
Okay. But what's interesting is he sits in the back and he says that's stipulation. If I get in a car with you, I sit in the back. One gas stop and he's in the front talking to him, and he's really bouncy and happy about the journey. And anyway, I think like Sydney can see these.
By the way, even that stupid story about how he won't use matches because one time he had a fuck off pack of matches in his pocket. They all set on fire, and then he had the audacity to go like, "I was thinking of suing that match company." Why? You didn't tell me to put me in fucking pocket, you mad god.
What I did love about that scene.
It was going to be a slam dunk case, that one. Yeah,
and by the way, that's even a subtle thing if people don't get it. That's how you know that the fucking Sydney character is an OG fucking gangster type guy. He still likes cigarettes with fucking actual matches, guys. He doesn't use a lighter because that's old school. That's just part of the aesthetic, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, what I love about that moment too is that that's one of those times where I think Paul Thomas Anderson's comedic chops really come in because they don't really cut away. It's like a Family Guy gag where you suddenly just clip to whatever they're talking about. Because like, did we need to see him with his pants on fire in line for the movie theater? No, the rest of the film is just stories people tell each other, and you don't. But in that moment, it's the one time it just like flips away to actually showing that scene from the past, and it is very funny.
It has something to do with friction, I guess. Spontaneous friction. I mean, they just went off. And I'm standing there in line for a movie, and all of a sudden, just wham! Whoa! Like that, scared the shit out of me.
And also the fact that he would have some, it's almost like you expect there to be a real traumatic experience here that he's going to describe or a dark story. And it's just like something stupid and random that happened. And now he just has a vendetta against matches. You're like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy?
He is actually, PTA is actually an incredible comedic director. People will associate him with drama, but I mean, I think about the scenes that are just so fucking laugh out loud funny, like in his movies. I mean, put it this way, even at the end of There Will Be Blood, I mean, I hope people understand how absurd
I drink your
final
milkshake
scene in the bowling
I mean, yeah, exactly.
I was when he's chased. What I loved about it, I saw that in the cinema at the time, and I remember when that scene started. I drink your. Everyone's fucking howling with laughter while
it's
he's
very
chasing
funny.
Paul Dano but then he kills him, and what was brilliant about that was like, this cinema full of people that was laughing immediately, and silence, like, oh shit, he's just murdered someone, like, and I love that he gets that he can do that switch up. And it's good that this is why I think if you're a Paul Thomas Anderson fan and you've seen films by him, and I know for a fact if you're watching this podcast, there will be like one smart ass in the fucking comments. None of you saw this movie, and that's fine. You're not supposed to. This was a $3 million budget movie remake of a short film. This is just launching his career, and what's great about it is you can see all of the hallmarks that he has in his other bigger movies, but it's just pared down. It's just lacking the scale. That's it. That's the only difference.
Well, it's also
sorry, go on.
No, it's also important to recognize that Paul Thomas Anderson writes his own movies too, and he wrote the script for this, and that's different than many of the other directors, including Villeneuve that we talked about, right? Like Paul Thomas Anderson is like a complete auteur. And that is very interesting because he's very good at writing dialogue. And that comes across hugely in this one because this is a character piece, guys. It is all dialogue up until the very, very end of this. And it is hard to write all these different characters. Think about the difference between, and I mean, he also gets excellent performances out of his actors. Like we talked about Philip Baker Hall, but he is this steely, classy, calm, mysterious man throughout this movie. And in contrast to John, who's a buffoon, or Jimmy, who's just like kind of a pathetic thug, or Philip Seymour Hoffman, who's just a redneck. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The writing for all the characters is all very distinct and very compelling.
Yeah, and as I said, the comedy that's there, it's like it's really well done. Like, I mean, and it's the same in all of his movies. I won't talk about Punch Drunk Love, although I would urge people to go and watch that because I know everyone was like, when Adam Sandler did Uncut Gems, everyone was like, "Wait, this motherfucker."
No, Punch Drunk Love is great.
Like, we knew that.
I saw Licorice Pizza too recently, and like he has a very dry sense of humor a lot of the time.
Yeah,
like it's deadpan or awkward comedy, and that's how he kind of rolls. And Licorice Pizza is an awkward coming of age story.
I don't know if you ever saw it, but you know how like sometimes movies do like weird trailers, and it's not like a traditional this summer, kind of trailer. Like Fight Club did it, where it was like, Brad Pitt going, "Did you know urine is sterile? That's right, you can drink it," or whatever, And they did these weird trailers that like people were like, "What the fuck is that?" Trainspotting did the same thing, where it was Ewan McGregor on the train tracks, and he went, "Whatever you do, don't let your friends tie you to the train tracks," and the train's coming towards him. And people were like, "What the fuck is that movie about?" And I wish people would be more adventurous like that, but obviously movies, Hollywood gonna Hollywood. But they did that for The Master. And I saw it in the cinema when the trailer for The Master came out. I can't remember what movie I was watching, but the trailer came up for the Master. And it was Joaquin Phoenix with like, there's a scene in the film where he talks to a shrink. But it was obviously an outtake or something that Paul Thomas Anderson had done. And it was just Joaquin Phoenix's character being shown the Rorschach test. And he was just going, "That's a pussy." And they would do the next one, "That's a pussy." And he'd do the next one, "That's a pussy." "That's two pussies." And like, it didn't, and then it would just cut to black, The Master coming this summer. Everyone in the cinema was like, "What the fuck just happened?" But I hope people can like track that down on YouTube. That is hilarious. That is one of the funniest things I've ever seen, because when you understand Freddy's character within The Master, again, we'll talk about it on that episode. The idea that he's playfully fucking with the shrink, but also he's a really compulsive character. Maybe all he is seeing is a vagina every time he looks at a Rorschach test. He's half blasted on these mixes. And so PTA is really fucking smart with this stuff. And all of his stuff is meant to be comic. I mean, Boogie Nights, I always viewed that as a comedy, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, like, it's hilarious in parts. So, yeah, I mean, Hard Eight, no different. There's an underpinning comedy to it all, which John C. Reilly is probably the most obvious component of it. He's very dryly funny in this film. Very funny. And the starts immediately with the Matches story in the car, which he then later retells.
By the way, another thing I think also does an awesome job with the ambience is the soundtrack is perfect.
Yes,
it's all like classic, like exactly what you want to hear for like a Vegas type film. Just a great job with that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, the scene, the setting the scene is really good in this film. Like, you understand it immediately. The only thing I would say is that, like I say, I think some people might lack the frame of reference that Reno is crap. Like when John C. Reilly gets up to the hotel room, he essentially gets gifted because he is using a scam to make it look like he's betting more than he actually is.
Yep.
He goes, "Wow, this is great," and you look at the fucking room, and it is shit. It is.
By the way, I almost, for real, even though it's
so bad.
not because it is just in the 90s, I almost think a joke that's unintended that's way funnier now is when he's explaining to Clementine how he nicks the cable TV. Have you seen how small the TV is?
Yes.
It's like that. Like, it's like I'm putting your phone on the other side of the room and trying to watch it. It's so shit. Because I agree with you. It's trying to play into the same joke of like, he thinks this is opulent. Like, just having shit-free movies.
Yeah. But I mean, also, if you remember,
I love it.
I mean, again, I know you will know this. Christopher, not so much, but you will get this, Duncan. Do you remember when you had the Skybox? And it used to be scrambled channels for movies.
Oh no! We had this in the States too.
Yeah?
So
Okay, good, right. Well, so what we used to have in the northeast of England was if you knew a motherfucker that could unscramble them pictures, give you one of them fake little cards to put in the.
That's where you got the softcore porn, man.
Yeah, and like no joke, man.
That was the dream.
Yeah, that was the dream. My
Even
uncle.
if it only worked for a week, then you had like wrestling, like you say, you had some maybe dodgy stuff at night if you stay up. You might get like a fucking Turner Classic Movies or something. You know, you get some legit shit back then.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. My uncle used to have a sideline in selling that shit. So I remember the first time I got the unlock all the channels. Fucking card D.
But this way, just to give you a Dickensian taste of where I grew up, my version was if you didn't know the person who could scam it, it's when one of the people who has Sky goes on holiday, you just get it, you give them like 10 quid to get it for a week or something, you know, and then there's that one too. You get the card off your mate, you know.
Exactly. And
that's how you pray and it doesn't run out on the day you want to watch something that you've seen advertised or something, you know, which inevitably does.
But like, I mean, literally, and that was the first time I realized one of the greatest sins ever perpetrated on the human race just is the existence of softcore porn, because it serves no master.
Oh, it's garbage.
It's like if I want to watch porn, I don't just want to see a man.
It is. It is essentially like, it's essentially Bill Hicks' the best bit on it ever. Just look it up, guys. His bit about like, you know, what's the point in this? It's the one about the arcing ropes of jism, if everyone remembers the skit. It's a pretty good one though, because I agree. It's like that thing of like, why would I want to watch the thing where it's like a man ass instead of the actual porn part? You know, it's like, you can't see anything. Get on the way. It is.
So that was the big disappointment. Like it finally got it de-scrambled, right?
Yep.
Here we go, XXX channel, and it's like, oh, this isn't even X. This is fucking garbage.
This explains your hostility to Pierce Brosnan's ass in the Thomas Crown Affair, by the way.
Listen, exactly. It brought back a lot of like disappointing memories. No, but I mean, this is it must be deliberate, because obviously the way he's talking about it is he's essentially doing a hotel de-scrambling, and it's really crap. And he's telling it to Gwyneth Paltrow's character, like, listen, by the way, if you ever want to watch a free movie,
he thinks it's a flex, exactly. I know.
But don't tell the front desk.
As if she would, right?
I know. Exactly. You just immediately, hey, you know those guys hooking up the thing for free movies. Like, I know.
Well, straight into this TV, and you get free movies.
Cool.
But don't say anything to front desk or anything.
No, I won't.
They'd probably make me pay for all of it.
It's great. It's great. But yeah, John C. Reilly's really good in this too, and he's not somebody I always like. As I said, he sometimes goes way too over the edge. But when he does like good, when he does the good kind of idiot, and it's not an overtly comedic role. Like I want to say, The Sisters Brothers, for example, if you've seen that. It's like a Western. It's like really good. A really, really good film. I really like him and stuff like that. I liked him in Magnolia. I thought he was great in that again. Paul Thomas Anderson really knows how to direct him. And I don't mind him when he turns up in absolute schlock garbage. Like he was in Skull Island, the King Kong movie. But in general, he is really good in not the subtle comedic roles. Like he was in The Lobster as well. He had a bit part in The Lobster, which is really good. But like I just can't stand him when he's just mugging for the camera, like Holmes Watson, that kind of stuff. He's like, stop. Oh, another good dramatic role he played. We need to talk about Kevin, the school shooting movie. Plays the father in that. Really good, like in that. But yeah, when he's in fucking, turning up in shit like Anchorman 2 or whatever, like fuck off.
By the way, the tragedy of this film to me is this. Bear in mind, this film is from 1996. It just makes me watch it and think, where are all the other movies where Philip Baker Hall's the main character? Like, I would see a bunch of them. You know what I mean? Like, he's too many bit parts, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, it turns out
I would
not
love
enough.
to see more films with this guy.
I mean, I will say, and obviously, again, we are going to talk about it, but I just loved him in Magnolia. I think that's an incredibly complex role because in that he's playing a father who may or may not have molested his own kid. It's like it's intense source material, and he's like dying of cancer and wants to make amends, but he's saying he can't remember, and because it's not explicit in whether or not
that's one thing I love about these films. Like I say, Paul Thomas Anderson doesn't clock you over the head. Like, but it's weird. That's what I hated about Villeneuve and Dune. It's like I had to take his interpretation. I wasn't being offered any. It wasn't a negotiation. These films just let the actual main plot breathe, and you have to infer a lot. And by the way, notice with actors like this guy, it isn't verbal. It's all in the performance and the way they hold themselves and the subtle looks. And I think this guy killed it in that role.
Yeah, like in this, as I said at the start, the thing that took me out of it a little bit was there was delivery where it was like, you're monologuing now, right? Now I don't give a fuck about that. Like I'm not one of those.
I'm used to plays, so I'm not. It doesn't bother me at all.
I don't care. I know that yes, this is.
You mean where they light the cigarette?
Yeah.
The thing is, it was a cold, dark night.
I love that shit.
But she was even colder in her heart,
Let me.
I know.
The camera starts doing that really slow zoom in.
That's my jam.
You see.
That's my
like,
jam.
Listen, I don't give a fuck about any of that because even if great dialogue, even when it's delivered in an unrealistic fashion, it's always going to resonate. It's always going to resonate like it would if you read it on the page. And there's definitely bits of that which take you out of what is a fairly natural, organic feeling film, and that is my only critique of the movie, is that sometimes, particularly with Philip Baker Hall, there will be these long, really stilted scenes where he's delivering dialogue. But actually, everything else, as you've already talked about the soundtrack, let's talk about some of the technical aspects of this movie, which include there is a tracking shot following Sydney through one of the casinos where he walks through the tables. So masterfully done.
Yeah, fire.
So masterfully done, where it's like
the craps game is very well shot as well with Phillips. It's like the way he gets into the table, like it feels really exciting because of the angles that he chooses. Like it feels very dramatic, the game.
Yeah, I'd actually forgotten Philip Seymour Hoffman was in this and just felt instantly sad when that scene happened. I was like, wow, hope this guy goes on to have a great career. It was just tragic. But yeah, I mean, the film is incredibly well shot from a technical perspective on a $3 million budget. And I guess it's kind of an interesting segue because we've gone across this Denis Villeneuve arc where we talk about a guy who has all these films where it's like, I spent $15 million and it looks like I spent $150 million. And this is kind of true as well. This movie, a $3 million budget is when you consider Samuel L. Jackson post Pulp Fiction is in it. That's probably half of that's his salary. It's got to be. And then you think about it, like the way it's shot. Technically, it looks great. It's wonderfully like say noirish in some shots. Brilliant, like excellently the lighting. It's just, it's all interiors. It's just great. It's like a really, really great movie. And by the way, if I was to show you this and say, this is a 90s movie made for $3 million, do you think this director went on to have a great career? You would go, well, how can he not? I mean, look, it's
Yes.
there. You can see and absorb the talent that's on screen. You know, yeah. It's what a great starting point. You know, like I
Yes.
mean, talk about starting strong. There's not many directorial debuts that are going to be this clear and distinct in a filmmaker's identity.
No,
'Cause
no. I mean, I'll give you an example. Another one that I often recommend like this, because it's where like everyone knows the director, but a lot of people aren't going to have seen this film. The other one is there's a really early Christopher Nolan movie called Following from like
Yes.
1998.
Yep,
It's,
yep.
it's similar. It's got like seeds of what he's going to do and things about the way the plot, by the way, spoiler, it's a plot where time sort of jumps around and you see the story. It's all the stuff you do.
Wow.
But again, I,
Yeah.
I like the idea
Great
that
fun.
like you can just see the genesis of what they're going to become. And then obviously we now know they do become that. So it's kind of cool to go back. That's why I said I thought for this, it was perfect to do this, because it's almost a primer if you're not are familiar with the universe of Paul Thomas Anderson films.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
also
and sorry.
Thor and Richard. Like, I also think it's important to talk about the budget point, because he really has never had a big budget movie, like not like a blockbuster budget
What's
movie.
his biggest, do you think?
All of the
Would it be?
films have been like $20 to $40 million.
Yeah.
His
fair
new
enough. Okay.
film that's
Yeah.
coming out next year has a $115 million budget, and it stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Sean Penn. But that is by far his biggest budget, like more than double. Like
Anyway,
his
that
next
also
movie.
speaks to who this director is, because I'm almost certain he is one of those directors where, like, the big stars, when they become the look, he makes some of his stars. That's a great quality already if you want to have people recurring, etc. But I also get the vibe people just want to be in his films. He's one of those people you want to work with. So you don't go. I want my 10 million. You do it for like the million or whatever, just to be in a great movie, don't you?
Well,
Yeah,
I
but
think
basically, if you
also-
look through all his film, it's like 30 million, 40,
Right.
Licorice Pizza was 40
Yeah.
million. There Will Be Blood was 25 million. He gets a lot of bang for his buck. And it's only his new movie, which is untitled, and there's no details out. It says $115 million budget with Warner Brothers, Leonardo DiCaprio, Sean Penn. But that's about it. That's about it.
But if you'd have given Denis Villeneuve $100 million and allowed him to cast Zendaya in the Paltrow role, and then it'd be a similar film, but it'd have a 20-minute monologue of just Denis Villeneuve explaining that Sidney is not a hero. He is a flawed character. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, what's
It's not even
interesting
the fucking
is
Denis Villeneuve arc we've talked for 20 minutes on this episode.
after
that Dune film's living rent-free in my head forever. I can't lie. It is. It just is.
after Boogie Nights, because what he did for Mark Wahlberg and Burt Reynolds, it was very similar to what happened with Tarantino.
Yes.
Like after Pulp Fiction, because he resurrected. The narrative goes he resurrected Travolta's career. He put Bruce Willis in a serious dramatic role, and took Samuel L. Jackson, who had some standout performances in Spike Lee movies. But because Pulp Fiction, and Uma Thurman as well, of course. Pulp Fiction was considered to be this like touchstone for like, wow, you want to be considered a serious actor, go work with Tarantino. Well, Boogie Nights was that as well, because it brought Burt Reynolds back from the dead. And let's be real, Mark Wahlberg's a fucking joke, isn't he?
He's not that good, is he? Let's be real.
Yeah,
Terrible.
that's just yeah. But I mean, somehow Paul Thomas Anderson was able to take that terribleness and incorporate it into a character, a male adult.
That's why I agree with
entertainer.
you. You have to know it's a dark comedy. Just the scene where he pulls the dick out at the end is like, you
I'm a
couldn't
bright
take
shining
that at face
star.
value. I know you couldn't take that at face value. You have to know that sort of like a dark laugh,
Yeah, no, but also like what I just love about that as well like when he's giving like director, like he's giving input, and so obviously imagine you're a movie director and you know that if you ever do a serious movie and you directed De Niro or an Al Pacino, they're gonna go, no, that's not it. That's not the heart of the character. I think he'd deliver it like this. I think he'd go, she's got a great ass. And I think he would scream it. And Michael Mann goes, yeah, all right, then let's just do that. Yeah, he's on cocaine all the time. Yeah, okay, yeah, you do that then. We'll do take 10, yeah? Right. So Paul Thomas Anderson does a movie about porn, and the porn actor is turned around to Burt Reynolds, who's directed like thousands of porn movies, going, I think I would do it on a stomach, and he's going, yeah, all right, yeah, smoking a cigar, do that. Yeah. He gets it, and he took Mark Wahlberg, who was like a fucking bum, and made him a serious actor. And so by the time Magnolia comes rolling around, everybody wanted to be in that movie, which of course was his biggest in terms of casting, whatever. And so yeah, if you look at the cast of Magnolia and you think about just these like everyone,
oh, it's insane, the cast,
everyone in that fucking movie, it's like launches their career. I mean, like, by the way, or if it didn't launch a career, it made people view you through a totally different lens. Tom Cruise wasn't being talked about.
That was the touchstone film for him. Yeah, of course.
Tom Cruise wasn't being talked about as a serious actor. William H. Macy, right? Like, I mean, I think he'd done Fargo by that point, sure. But I mean, like, he ended up going on to do like a bunch of fucking other like great fucking films off the back of this. Cemented him as a fantastic character actor. Julianne Moore, right? As the wife. So I mean, PTA, he is the guy that, like, if you're an actress who's like kind of on the shelf a little bit but has talent, he will come up with a role that is going to get the best out of you. And let's say, but Hard 8 is only a small cast. It's only like really got 4 actors in it that you would know. Some great cameos, sure, but that was it. This tells you everything you need to know about this director in terms of, if you want a naturalistic performance, if you want a nuanced and subtle performance, if you want great fucking dialogue, great monologues to deliver, great moment to moment scenes, he's got you covered. Like
I think it's also amazing that he's, the same guy who's writing this great dialogue is also the same person drawing out excellent performances from those actors. That is underrated as like 2 skills, right? Because
and you're highly love distinct. Phantom Thread, because I know obviously
I haven't seen Phantom Thread.
Jumped ahead, you are gonna love Phantom Thread. You will. The dialogue in that is just it's so up your alley. It's ridiculous. It's like because it takes that quintessential posh English, kind of quality of like the classics, but puts it into a story. Which, by the way, I went in blind. Because I like to he's his director. I like to go into his movies blind. I don't want to watch any of the hype or read anything about it. I've done it with every single film of his. Like, I just shut off until I can get a moment to see it. And I did it with, I mean, put it this way, There Will Be Blood. I think that came out the same year as No Country for Old Men, and I think I saw them within a few, like a few months of each other, and they're always paired, like somehow thematically in my mind. But I knew nothing about it. I just knew it was kind of like the story about a guy who builds oil wells, which of course that isn't what it's about. And Phantom Thread blew me away because I thought it was going to be some shitty, pretentious, romantic drama about, he's a guy who makes fucking dresses and he's an arsehole, but he makes the right dress for the right woman, and it's a metaphor for how love no, it ain't that.
To be fair, there was a lot of fanfare about that being Daniel Day-Lewis's last movie, and I don't think that he would have chosen that as his last film. Like, he would want something a bit more.
Listen, I'm gonna pull Daniel Day-Lewis's card a little bit. I think he fucking I'll never forgive him for Bill the Butcher. That's like the most overrated performance of all time.
I mean, look, I think Gangs of New York is a garbage movie, but his performance is good at that.
No, I see. I go the other way. I think he's as
no, that movie is trash, man.
That movie. I think that is like the most scenery chewing bullshit, and the fact that gets held up as like, Daniel Day-Lewis was a man. Did you know? He like, no, I'm fine, actually. I'm fine that they pulled him out of cobbler school to do that trash. He should have stayed making.
Well, the irony of that, of course, is Gangs of New York also has John C. Reilly in. He plays the cop,
I know.
Remember? By the way, I'm actually on
John C. Reilly, the best thing in that film, in my
opinion. I actually think that, obviously, I think Daniel Day-Lewis is mega in that role, but I actually think that movie in itself is one of the craziest enigmas of a movie I've ever seen, because there are some amazing actors in that movie. Think about like Brendan Gleeson is fucking fire as that like Irish guy. John C. Reilly actually plays a really good villain in it, by the way. Even Liam Neeson's good. The joke is just a mixture of this plot is shit and then fucking DiCaprio and Cameron Diaz are so bad
They're
they
so
actually
bad.
do pull down. They pull down the rest of the film completely. So, like, because when I think of those characters, it should be a really good film, but it isn't. It's garbage. It's totally
it's also
really
like
bad.
you know, the kind of late stage Scorsese thing where he has to dial it up to like 11 in every single movie, and like there's cannonballs raining down on New York, and there's just people like crawling through the debris. It's just so ridiculous that
I will say
started
as
laughing.
well, I'll also never forgive the idea of his name, right? In a story where it's about like changing, his name is Amsterdam, like, boo, boo, you fucking hack. Like, that's actually why, because there's a difference thing what we're talking about now. A PTA movie lets it breathe, it lets you figure out the song,
Yeah,
lets you
exactly.
read. That's like him just telling, like, the middle put in, like, it's like, it used to be called New Amsterdam and now it's New York. Yeah, I get it. I get it. I get it.
I know, yeah. That is like really, like that is really bad.
Oh,
But I
there's
think-
the fucking banger arc. Overrated
Yeah.
Scorsese movies in which
Yeah, there you go.
hating all the comments.
I mean, I hate all of his movies from like the last 30 years. So
we get so much hate.
I am like the number one last 3 decades Scorsese hater. So
I mean, look, it's an interesting
I
comparison.
mean, my joke would be the
because-
best thing he's done in the last 20 years is just diss Marvel movies. That's about it.
yeah. It's an interesting comparison because, and I can bring it back to this because this will get to as we go down the Paul Thomas Anderson arc. Actually, it really shows you that doing a big scope movie with an ensemble cast of fantastic actors, it's not a slam dunk. It really isn't. You can churn out some absolute garbage. And Scorsese certainly did it with Gangs in New York. But I mean, if you think about it compared to like something like a Magnolia or a Boogie Nights, where it's like just dozens of amazing actors who were all vying for screen time, and how will we, they film dozens of hours of extra footage, and it's all done in the editing room, who's going to get a bit more and what the story's going to be and that kind of thing. Kind of like Thin Red Line or something like that, where like the famously the fucking star character wasn't even in the film by the end of it. It really shows how masterful Paul Thomas Anderson is as a director, and it starts with a movie like Hard Eight. To just be so confident in, this is the story I want to tell. These are the actors that are going to tell it. This is the dialogue they are going to say. And I don't need to say anything more or do anything more or be over the top. The work will speak for itself. And that's illustrative of the career he's had, which, I mean, for me, coming off the Denis Villeneuve arc, it's like he didn't have a miss until the Dune movies for me. But
I don't know. I will
PTA
say, after watching Sicario, there were kind of warning signs in that one with how cliche the plot was. You could see,
but even the way it was shot was beautiful.
Yeah,
There was so many
Look, I like
positives,
Sicario, but I'm just saying the red flags were there in retrospect.
But I mean, but with PTA, like, honestly, I would say probably his weakest film is Inherent Vice. And if you're adapting Thomas Pynchon, you're already...
He did a great job. Yeah,
you're already struggling.
Yeah, it's not the definition of unfilmable fucking work,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, honestly, I think there's few directors that have started as strong and not only maintained that quality, but like just improved on it consistently. And for me, he's a guy like like a Nolan or whoever it might be. I'm always going to watch their films.
Yes.
I'm going to watch it whether it gets a bad review, whether Roger Ebert, especially if Roger Ebert gives it 1 star. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there for that because this guy hasn't missed for me.
Yep.
And that's even with Inherent Vice being a bit like, I can't really understand it. Why is everyone mumbling? What's going on? And Licorice Pizza, I thought, was just a really interesting bunch of vignettes. Not really a great cohesive movie, but everything else he's done is it's a bona fide classic.
Yes.
Believe the hype about this guy. And Hard Eight is if you like Hard Eight, you're gonna love what comes next if you haven't seen the films. And if you don't like Hard Eight, I'm gonna just say this: I'd still implore you stick around for his later films because they are you know, he gets better. I mean, it's not that I think this is a solid 4 out of 5 movie. But the fact that he goes on to deliver just a string of fives, Magnolia, low key, one of my favorite films. Just an incredible director, really is.
I think this director is mega. He's one of the ones where like you almost can't overrate him because people just forget his name. They know his movies, but when people do that list of like the cliche of the who are the greatest directors ever, Kubrick, Scorsese, like he doesn't get in that list somehow. Like people forget him. They do put in the modern day people like Nolan. By the way, Villeneuve, just because it's you now, probably get in there. But like I agree, he's like the sleeper. This is like the sleeper fucking OP director in Hollywood because actually when you do that thing of like obviously it was more of a 70s thing to be the auteur, wasn't it, when they had like full control, etc. He actually like deservedly has that control and lives up to it. And as we're saying here, in some ways, it's actually just his incredible competence that probably is getting him some of these actors for cheap or just to do the film without having to pay top dollar.
He's the closest.
So he created some of these guys as well, which I think is also a big deal.
Yeah, with obviously it's not a direct analog, so he doesn't appear in any of his movies, but I think he's like the closest to like a modern Orson Welles. Okay. You know, in terms of the scope of the movies, you think about what he does and, you know, kind of the topics. You know, like, for example, The Master and Citizen Kane, I think are kind of like interesting, you know, counterparts. So, yeah, I mean, just a bonkers talent. And like I say, you know, started with a little small indie movie about John C. Reilly.
By the way, along those lines, actually, that's one thing I would end on, which is I remember when The Master came out, that was when all the people who liked Paul Thomas Anderson were actually really hard forcing the idea that like he's got the reference point to Kubrick, right? They were all like, look, you know, the masterful way that it's shot and stuff. But the difference is, one of the things I actually think, even though some people like it about Kubrick films, is they always do have like a detached aspect. They're not very sort of emotional and human. But actually, to bring it back again, I do think like this film here, Paul Thomas Anderson always has like a human element in it or like a heart to the film that goes along with some of the darker elements or like more serious performance. There's always like some kind of like almost like a reason to live for these characters. I mean, Magnolia is basically essentially that whole thing. That's why I say, actually, I think it's perfect primer. Because if you go from this to Magnolia, if you like this, Magnolia is this times 10. And with a bigger scope and better, and some of the same actors, but better performance. It's, I think people, if you like this film, you're going to know if you're going to like this arc. Because the rest of the films just get better. I agree with you.
Yeah.
All right.
Totally.
Well, that's it, guys. Magnolia next week. And hopefully you enjoyed Heart 8. I hope some of you actually watched this movie because I hadn't seen this one and I haven't seen Phantom Thread yet. I've seen the other two.
Just to end on as well, what's brilliant about this is doing Magnolia next. Tom Cruise is a proto Andrew Tate. I just can't wait for a generation of people that have never seen Magnolia to be like, holy shit. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was going on back then, too.
All Gen Alpha will be like, it was a sick movie, right, Richard? I love that Tom Cruise character. They'll just don't ironically like it, actually. What colour's your lamp? Bugatti or whatever the fuck, you know?
Yeah, exactly, dude. So I'm super hyped for Magnolia. I fucking love any excuse to watch.
Shout out Red Pill fans. Tune in for that one.
All right, guys. It will be fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did for the first time. Like, I hadn't seen this film. I thought it was really magnetic right from the start of this movie. Brilliant performances, wonderful dialogue. So really fun stuff. We will see you guys next week for Magnolia.